The VCore Pro is dead, RIP to a legend, but my god was it time to change that naming system. Well, let's all welcome in the Yonex Percept. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets and Runners. Now right off the bat, I want to apologize that it's taken us so long to get our Percept review out. We weren't able to get our hands on one until recently, and I took a small vacation last week, but I finally got onto the court to test it out. Now just in case there's any confusion, the Percept is basically the new VCore Pro, just with a fancy new name, which I think we can all agree was pretty necessary, because VCore versus VCore Pro was always a bit confusing. It has the exact same shape and very similar specs to the outgoing VCore Pro, and also pretty much the exact same rackets in the line with the exception of that brand new 100D, which I am so excited to test out. Now as usual, before we go on, remember that you can check out the Percept on our website racketsandrunners.ca, and please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments section what you want me to cover next. There are some great comparisons we can make now that the Percept is here, and I'm very excited to get those going. Let me know what you guys think would be a good comparison with any of the rackets in this line. Now today we're taking a look at the Percept 97, which like I just mentioned is pretty much identical in spec to the old VCore Pro 97. Has a 97 square inch head size, it weighs 310 grams, has a 16 by 19 string pattern, 21 millimeter beam, and very similar swing weight. So what has Yonex actually changed? Well, reading up on some of the marketing here, they've added what they've creatively named Stiff Racket Face Design. First of all, fantastic name, because you can probably guess what it does. Yup, it makes the racket face stiffer and the throat more flexible. Now I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty familiar to me. Oh yeah, auxetic, paradigm bending, 45 braid. They all claim to do the same thing, and I guess now we're adding stiff racket face design to the list. I like the originality. But in all seriousness, there's a reason why Yonex has developed this stiff hoop flexible throat layup, and that's because it really does work. We've seen it with all those technologies I just mentioned. It really helps keep that good control profile while making the racket more stable, more forgiving, and more playable at lower swing weights. Now interestingly enough, the overall frame stiffness is actually identical to the old VCore Pro, with the Percept flexing at 60 RA. But because of that new technology, they definitely do play quite differently, and that's why we gotta start with feel. The biggest change coming from the VCore Pro is in feel, and I'm so happy about that. Now, don't get me wrong, these aren't drastically different rackets, but they have made some subtle changes here that I think have generally helped improve feel a lot. One of the major issues I had with the previous VCore Pro is that I always felt that it was just a little bit too mushy for me. I didn't like the fact that Yonex thickened it up by 0.5 millimeter, also made the racket softer, and I always found that vibration dampening mesh was just a little bit too intrusive on the actual feel of the racket. While they technically haven't changed the stiffness or even the beam design, that stiffening technology in the racket's face has definitely helped eliminate that mushy feel and just generally made the ball pocketing more responsive and more well-defined. Also, it seems that Yonex have gotten rid of vibration dampening mesh here and replaced it with a new dampening technology called servo filter. Now, I was a pretty big hater of vibration dampening mesh, honestly probably a little bit too big of a hater, but I thought it dampened feel way too much, and yeah, this new technology is just way better. It doesn't overpower those good vibrations nearly as much. I still wouldn't say the Percept has the cleanest feel ever, but there is generally a much better connection to the ball here. Now I've been trying to come up with creative ways to describe a racket's feel, and to me the Percept feels crisp and firm, but a little blunt, kind of like taking a bite of an apple that's lost a bit of its flavor, if that makes any sense. It actually has a pretty similar feel to the current Pro Staff V14, which makes sense considering the similar technologies both those rackets have. But yeah, crisp and firm, just a little bit blunt, whereas the previous VCore Pro I would just describe as overly gooey and spongy. Also, for those of you that are a little bit worried because you're hearing the word stiffer getting thrown around, don't worry, it's still a very comfortable racket, so you won't have any discomfort issues here. Let's talk about stability for a second, because these stiff hoop, soft throat technologies are mainly designed to help with stability, and it works wonders on the Percept. The previous VCore Pro had a similar swing weight at around 317, but I always thought that was way too low to play in stock form. With a thin beam and soft flex like that, it just wasn't stable enough against big hitters, which is fine because you can always add lead tape, but not everybody wants to customize their rackets. This new tech has basically made it so that Yonex can keep that swing weight nice and low, but this time it's much more playable stock. The Percept is way sturdier on impact, it doesn't flutter, it doesn't get pushed around. I'm starting to be less impressed by this because everyone's doing it, but it's still very good work from Yonex. Now you absolutely can still customize the Percept up to a certain spec. It's not like you're gonna make it too stable or anything like that. And because those specs are quite low in stock form, especially that swing weight, I actually think it's a fantastic platform racket. You all know about my love for a leather grip. You can definitely throw one on, but also put some weight at 3 and 9, maybe bring that swing weight up to around 325. It'll play great like that. Yonex rackets in particular, because they have longer sweet spots, can definitely do with some weight on the sides. It just helps expand that sweet spot horizontally a bit. Alright, so moving on to control, it might not technically be called a VCore Pro, but it's basically the next VCore Pro, and we all know that that's Yonex's control racket, so as you would expect, control is fantastic on the Percept. I was a little mad at the direction Yonex took with the previous VCore Pro because I was such a big fan of the Dual G and the ones that followed that one, that thickening it up and changing the shape wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but I've come around to it with this one. Of course, I do understand why they're doing it, it just makes the racket more accessible to a wider variety of players. A thicker beam means more stability at a lower swing weight. But the biggest thing is here, because the feel has gotten better on the Percept, that's pretty much what's helped improve its control. The sweet spot feels way more precise, so you know where the ball is in the string bed at all times, which just helps provide that sensation of more control over your shot. It's definitely the most controlled racket in Yonex's lineup right now, although probably worth at least a comparison to the VCore 95. And I know I didn't include the previous VCore Pro in my top 5 controlled rackets from a while back, but when I do remake that list, I think the Percept's going to make it in. You make a racket sturdier and keep the swing weight identical, it's not just going to be more stable, it's also going to be more powerful. Those two characteristics go hand in hand, and the Percept definitely packs more of a punch than the old VCore Pro, but I don't want anyone mistaking that better power with less control. The Percept is simply more powerful and more controlled than the racket it replaces, which I know is always a little bit hard to believe, but that's one thing that these stiff hoop, flexi throat technologies have been really good at accomplishing recently. It's sturdier on impact, no question about that, but because the dwell time is still long with the flexible throat, you don't actually lose that sensation of better control despite its good power. Spin is a little bit more complicated to explain, but kind of follows the same logic. If the racket holds up better in the hoop, that means it's going to shoot the ball out with more spin because the ball doesn't lose as much energy during dwell time, and that's definitely the case here. Now, Jonas over at Tennis Nerd did mention in his review of the Percept that he thinks the string bed might be ever so slightly denser on this racket than on the outgoing VCore Pro, and I've been looking at these for a while, and he might be right, but they do look very similar to me. The only way to know for sure, I guess, would be to try to fit the Percept's grommet in the VCore Pro or vice versa, but either way, I do find the Percept to be noticeably more spin friendly. It also helps the Percept's spin profile that it's more playable in stock form. The fact that you pretty much had to add weight to the hoop in the VCore Pro to make it stable enough also meant you were slowing the racket down. Playing it in stock form means that you can benefit from more of that whip ability and get more racket head speed on contact, but keep in mind this is a very marginal difference. Now don't get me wrong, it's not a super spin friendly racket, which is a good thing. You don't really want a control racket to be one of those crazy wild spin monsters. It doesn't really have any tech in here to amplify spin, although I will say these grommets are just a little bit more open than what you're going to find from like a pro staff, for example, and that just means the string is going to have a little bit more space to move and snap back, but it's nothing crazy. If I had to directly compare the spin to other control rackets, it's a little bit less than the Blade and the Radical Pro, and a little bit more than the Pro Staff and the TF40. Okay, I think I've made it pretty obvious throughout the course of this review that I wasn't the biggest fan of the previous VCore Pro and that I like the Percept a lot more. All these subtle changes have really helped it improve big time overall. It really needed that better feel, and Yonex delivered on that, which has just helped it become such a better control racket in general. If you didn't love the previous one, the Percept will probably be a lot better for you. Maybe not exactly like previous VCore Pros, but just exactly what a modern control racket should be. As has been the trend in the industry, it's a control racket with a more forgiving side to it, which is great because historically control rackets have been pretty demanding and tough to use, but making them more accessible to all just means more people can benefit from their good playability characteristics. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a huge fan of this racket. I think Yonex absolutely knocked it out of the park here. I've had a ton of fun playing with it over the last couple of sessions. I know some of you said I should probably wait to do my racket switch journey until the Percept came out, and you're probably right, but yeah, Yonex just released a banger here. I would say the Percept 97 can work for a high level intermediate, but it's probably still more of a purely advanced player's racket, which is why I'm so excited to try those 100 square inch Percepts. Yonex quietly released a fantastic racket last time with the VCore Pro 100, which wasn't really getting talked about much, but we started playing with it at the store over the last several months, and we all really liked it, myself included. One guy liked it so much he actually switched to it. There's definitely more hype surrounding those 100s this time, especially with the fact that they've included a 100D, and I think you can all imagine how excited I am for that racket, considering how I feel about 18 main 100 square inch rackets. For now though, that is going to be the end of the video. Thank you Yonex for finally changing the VCore Pro's name. Thank you so much for improving the feel as much as you did. Thank you all for watching, and remember that any of the rackets we mentioned here, if you want to demo them, come visit us in store, or you can check them out online at racketsandrunners.ca.